Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Towns Talk podcast, the podcast where we talk about all the towns in Minnesota.
Welcome, everyone. This is Garth Anderson, and I hope everyone's having a great day today.
So, today we are going to talk about our trip that we did just 2 weeks ago, and this was a trip up the Iron Range. So, we started at our cabin, and our cabin is in the city of Pequot Lakes, but it's actually closer to Nisswa. And so we started there, and then our final destination was Chisholm before going back home.
Yeah, and it was actually a pretty fun trip, and so we're going to talk about all the cities we visited, or get through as many as we can. If we don't get through all of them today, we'll finish up part 2 next week with more of the cities that we visited.
Yes. So first we're going to talk about the drive. So our first destination that we had planned was Reamer, Minnesota, but we didn't actually stop there first. The place where we stopped first was 50 Lakes. And the only reason we stopped there is because we saw the sign for the city hall that was right off of where we needed to turn. And so we didn't get to see much of the city at all, but it was pretty funny because the city hall was attached to a bar.
Yeah, and I don't think there are 50 lakes in that town. So it is it's called 50 Lakes. Not sure about the history of it, but basically it was just a corner of two county roads and that's where we turned into the thing. We turned in off of one county road and turned off onto another county road that we needed to go on.
Yeah, I don't think there was a downtown there. I think it was just a city that was spread out, because normally city halls are in the downtown.
Right,
So.
and that was just on a corner with, as Brady said, attached to a bar.
Yeah. So our first destination was Reamer, Minnesota. Now this is we both, Dad and I, love this city. So their entire premise is that they're the home of Bigfoot. And I don't know how they can be the home of Bigfoot, because Bigfoot originated in Washington. Yeah, Washington.
Or Vancouver, somewhere up in that upper northwest area, whether it's southern Canada or the Washington state area.
Yeah, so I don't know how they can claim to be the home of Bigfoot, but they are. And every year they host the Bigfoot Days. We've never been there, but it does seem like a funny thing to go to one time if we're up there during that time.
So and this is actually our second time through Remer. We went through there a year ago, actually, when we went up to International Falls. We also went through there, but we did not get a chance to go see the awesome Bigfoot statue that they have there.
Yes. So it's called the Bigfoot gas station, and in that gas station they have this big statue of Bigfoot, and they also have a ton of memorabilia, like stay back Bigfoot or Sasquatch breeding grounds, stuff like
Right.
that.
You can get bumper stickers, you can get t-shirts, you can get anything that your heart desires with Sasquatch or Bigfoot on it.
Yeah, and of course, also in Reamer, we had to stop at the city hall, and that was in like a complex area where there was the city hall, fire department, and stuff like that. And I think it was a pretty boring city hall.
Another cool thing, though, that they have in Reamer is they have another statue, which is an eagle statue, which is a dedication to like veterans, and it was put up by, I think, either the VFW or one of those. And what we find is a lot of these small towns like that will have some of these veteran memorial places in which they dedicate space to those who served in our country, and those who served specifically from that particular area. So it's kind of neat to visit and see some of that stuff, and see how the cities can rally around some of that and create that.
Yeah. And the first time we were in Reamer, that was not a stop we were planning to take at all. But we were going through and we saw all this Bigfoot stuff. And then I saw the big statue of an eagle, and then in front of this like Reamer motel, there was also a geocache there that we found. And then there was also this metal cutout of Bigfoot. And we were like, we gotta stop. We gotta stop. So yeah, that's how we originally found out about Reamer, and then we actually made it a destination on this trip. A quick stop, but yeah, I think it's a pretty nice city.
Yeah, it is. It's fun one, and it's kind of on our bucket list to someday visit and go there when it's the Bigfoot days.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, maybe we'll get a Bigfoot sighting. Who knows? And if you're ever there, and if you get a Bigfoot sighting, let us know.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of that, in the Bigfoot gas station, there's this like 100-page book, this like homemade book. It's not like for sale or anything. This basically like city-made book, it seemed, of just the Bigfoot history in, I think it was specifically in Minnesota. We didn't really read it, but it was this very thick book. It had to have been at least 100 pages.
Yeah, it was, and it had in there sightings of people had seen Bigfoot in that area, and we've not seen him yet, so.
Nope. All right, I think that's all for Reamer. So our next stop was Grand Rapids. Now, in Grand Rapids, we didn't actually see that much, despite it being a pretty big city, because we didn't have much time in all of the locations. But we went there for the city hall and the county courthouse, because I collect city halls, and also I'm in a server that collects county courthouses too. That's not my top priority. City halls are my top priority, but it's also something I do, and it was super close by. And then we also saw the Central School too.
Yeah, and the neat thing about some of those some of those smaller cities. Now, Grand Rapids isn't a really small town. It had a decent population, but the neat thing about some of those is that some of the buildings in which their town hall is are nice, big, old buildings, and so they're pretty neat looking. And if I recall, the Grand Rapids one was a pretty neat old building. And was that the one that had kind of the stone?
Yeah. So we noticed during the trip that a lot of the city halls up there were actually pretty nice. I've been going to these boring city halls, in the suburbs. Those are mainly just boring buildings, but the Grand Rapids one, we're looking at it here. It's this like brick building. It says Grand Rapids Village Hall, so it's pretty old, and it has this nice like stone work on it too. And so yeah, as I mentioned, we also went to the Central School, but sadly it was closed. But it is another beautiful brick building with shops inside, but of course we couldn't visit the shops.
Yeah, that was kind of a bummer. It looked like the shops were closed when we were there. I'm not sure why, but maybe they're only open for certain times or things. But another nice old building, and it's nice to see some of those old buildings like that. One other thing I was going to mention about that is, now I don't remember what I was going to say. So you talk about something and it'll come back.
Okay, yeah. So now in these cities, especially the bigger ones, which this is definitely a bigger one, we are going to talk about the places that we didn't visit. So I have this map pulled up here, and I'm just going to look around and see the places that we didn't visit that we could.
So I remembered what I was going to say. So, and that city hall was on a street called Pokegama Avenue. So one thing, the GPS pronounced it Pokegama. So Brady and I got in a conversation as to what's the right way to pronounce that. And I guess it comes out that it's really Pokegama is how you need to pronounce that. And you'll run into that a lot with some of these small towns, even the names of the towns. How do you pronounce them? And so it gets into a nice conversation as to what, how do you say some of these names, and what's the origin of some of those names, and where did they come from?
Yeah.
Because there's a big lake there that's big popular lake called Pokegama Lake that a lot of resorts are on, and a lot of people visit. So that's where that name came from. But I'm sure that that lake was named after something else. So that,
Yeah.
whatever Pokegama means.
And that's also reminds me of like the Remmer versus Reamer, because I thought that it was Remmer for the longest time, but I know somebody who owns a resort up there, and they said that's actually pronounced Reamer, so I thought that was pretty interesting. But anyways, we are now going to talk about the stuff that we could have done there if we had more time. So the two most obvious ones is the Judy Garland Museum, which is the lady in the Wizard of Oz.
Right, it's Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, and we actually drove by it when on our way back home, when we went through Grand Rapids on our way back. We actually drove by it, but we didn't have time to stop there and to see that. But it is Judy Garland is the actress, the name of the actress who played Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. And so it seems like the other place that is pretty significant in Grand Rapids is the Forest History Center. Now, I think it's just a museum that talks about the history of forestry in the area. And so that would be a pretty cool destination. It looks like there's even a fire tower you can climb.
Ooh, that would be fun, huh?
Yeah.
Brady already climbed a fire tower.
Oh my, yeah. So I climbed a fire tower. There's one in Pequot Lakes, and it was like blowing in the wind. I did not like it, actually. And another place that you could visit is the namesake of Grand Rapids. There are rapids on the Mississippi River there. Of course, now it has been dammed, so the rapids are kind of actually gone, but there are still two dams you can visit. I find this very interesting that there's one dam up the Mississippi, and then there's another one just a little bit down it. But I believe that's because there's a paper mill right next to that one dam, and then the other one, they needed energy, I guess. Yeah. And so one more place, of course, we mentioned it, is Pokegama Lake. That seems like a thing that you kind of have to stay on a resort, though, to truly experience it, you know?
Right.
On any of these lakes. I mean, there's public water accesses, but you can't really get a feel for them, I guess. Do you have any other places that you think?
One other thing I was going to mention about the Judy Garland house is, some of you might not know this, but the reason why they have a Judy Garland museum and not a Wizard of Oz museum is because Judy Garland was actually born in Grand Rapids. She's from Grand Rapids. So I think the house that they use the museum for her is actually the house she grew up in. And it's been renovated and it looks really nice now. But that is one other note about her.
Yeah. And so one other thing we're going to do for each of these cities is talk about their small or large town festivals. So it looks like the one for Grand Rapids is called Tall Timber Days. And so Tall Timber Days, I assume, is relating to that, the Forest History Center that I mentioned before. And it looks like a pretty big festival, actually, here. They have the typical, it seems like they have the typical things that a festival would have, like a parade. And it looks like they have some lumberjack type things, like rolling on logs.
Ooh, log rolling.
Yeah, log rolling. Probably chopping wood, I would assume, too. And, of course, they have those stands. Looks pretty busy, too. Now, in podcast form is kind of a bit worse because you guys can't see what we're talking about, but we can try to explain it the most. Oh, they also have wood carving, too, with chainsaws.
That's cool.
Yeah, so this seems to be a festival all relating to timber and wood, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, and if you happen to go and look it up, you'll notice on their logo they've got a lumberjack, which I think that's Paul Bunyan. So again, they're bringing into the Paul Bunyan lore into their festival as well.
Yeah. And if you guys want to visit Tall Timber Days, it'll be August 2nd through 4th, 2024, which we haven't experienced yet, so hasn't gone on yet.
So you still have time to go.
Yeah.
Looks like they have a street dance.
Oh, yep.
On Saturday.
And then on Sunday is the Grand Parade, which includes all that wood carving and stuff. So, yeah, pretty cool festival, I think. So, the next city. So, we leave Grand Rapids on 169, and it's a bit of a drive, not that far, like 10 minutes probably at most. And then you end up in Coleraine, Minnesota. Now, Coleraine is one of the ones where we didn't really do much in there. We just stopped at the city hall, and that was about it. So it looks like, well, the city hall, first off, I did like. It was a good building. It was brick, like I mentioned that it would be before. And then next to it was this old school building too, which was the Greenway Middle/High School.
Yeah, and the one thing, I don't know how many of you, obviously Minnesota is the state of hockey, and Coleraine, if you're familiar with Greenway Coleraine, that's I think the name of their high school, and they have always been a huge hockey powerhouse in the state of Minnesota. So for a small town to always be a hockey powerhouse, that's pretty amazing, and so and that was one thing we also try to talk about, is other things that we know about when we get to these cities, if we know anything about them, and Brady will share one about that he knew about one of the towns coming up as well, and so that'll be fun to it's always fun to discuss that and see some of those places when you talk about them and you hear about them. It's fun to talk a little bit more about some of those types of things.
Yeah. And so, of course, there's stuff that we didn't do there. So it looks like there's this pretty big lake that Coleraine is directly on, called Trout Lake. And at the top, it has a restaurant and a public water access and even a beach. So it seems it's a pretty small city. And so that's basically all there is there, but it's pretty cool. And there's also Longyear Park, it seems like, too. And of course, the downtown will have some shops and some restaurants as well that we didn't go to. So the next city is right next to Coleraine. They border each other, and so it was like a 2-minute drive from the city hall, basically. And as you're its name is Bovey, and as you're entering it, you see this big sign that says Home of the Grace Painting. And if you haven't seen the Grace Painting, it's a man, he's praying for his meal. And I actually knew about this, but had forgotten. And I knew about this because I was looking at I'm trying to make a list of all the small town festivals in Minnesota. And of course, Bovey's in the B's. And I have hit the B's. So I looked up Bovey's festival and saw on their main page that they had the Grace Painting in the top left. Yeah.
And they have throughout the town, and it's a pretty small town. I think they have under 1,000 people in that town, and they have little flags that have that Grace Painting on it to show that they're celebrating that type of thing. So there was some things we actually did when we were in Bovey.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about a couple of those.
Yeah, so the first thing we did, of course, was stop at the city hall. And the city hall was one of the best ones on the trip because it was registered in the National Registry of Historic Places. And it was this nice brick building. And in front of it was a plaque that explained the Grace Painting, too. And so we looked at that, and we looked at all of that. And then across the street, we noticed this one shop that we wanted to go in. And its name was Annabella's Antique Mall Collectibles. Yeah, Antique Mall, basically. And so shout out to them.
Yeah, and it actually, that place actually had one of the highlights for me of our trip. You wouldn't think that an antique shop would. We did go in and look at all this stuff, and I actually found some bobbleheads. I did not buy them, but I found some bobbleheads that I could have bought. But that was not the highlight. The highlight was this place was the outside doesn't look very big at all.
No.
But you go inside, and this place is massive. It's like almost goes on infinitely. And you can go down the basement, and there's these nooks and crannies of everything. And we found out in there that down in the basement there was a secret passage that led to a speakeasy during the time of Prohibition, and you could actually see that. Now there was a tunnel, and it went, and of course the tunnel, you couldn't walk all the way down the tunnel. It ended, but you could see the doorway that it went to. So people would probably, and my guess is it wasn't an antique shop back in the Prohibition days. It was maybe just a restaurant or something, or somebody's store or something else. And people would go in there, and they'd go down to the basement, and they'd take the little secret passage tunnel to the speakeasy and be able to drink during Prohibition, and nobody knew about it. And so I thought that was like cool history about this. And this is a little small town in Minnesota, and they've got this cool little tunnel to a speakeasy. So I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah, and it's such a small building, and it just shows you that, like, the place that you're walking on has history, even if you know it or don't know it. I mean, we walked into that shop not knowing anything about that, and we figured out that it had that, which I find super cool. And in the shop, there were also a lot of paintings of Grace. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, so if you wanted to get one, you could easily buy one at that shop. And that's the neat thing about these trips that we take is we find things. We go to see certain things, but we sometimes will find other things that become a surprise to us and go, oh, that's really neat. We didn't even know that existed. Mm-hmm. And I think we found a few of those types of things on this trip that we were surprised about.
Yeah. So I have a few more things to mention about Bovey. First off is that, of course, the Grace painting is on their street signs as well. It's on the left side. But also that when you go onto their main street, which actually looks like it's called 2nd Street here, but you go onto their main street, and it's interesting because it has this white color, and in the middle is like a red cobbled, it's this like red cobblestone. And I just thought that was very interesting that they made their downtown a different color than before, than normal.
And it's like 3 blocks long, the downtown, with that. So it's not like, these small towns, their downtowns are not massive. They're just short, but those are the only 3 blocks that have that cobblestone middle part.
Yeah. And one more thing is that if you look down the main street facing to the west, is that I managed to see this big sign on a hill that said Bovey written in white rocks. And I find that interesting because I actually tried to look for where that was a few days after our trip. You cannot find it on Google Maps. I cannot see where it was. Because I remember looking down Main Street, not 2nd Street, and seeing the word Bovey written in rocks. And I have no idea where that is. But I took a picture of it too. And yeah, so one more thing to mention about Bovey is their festival. So their festival's name, surprisingly, isn't Bovey Grace Days. It's Bovey Farmer Days. And let's see. So Bovey Farmer Days Day, single day actually. It looks like it was, let's see. It's one of the longest running festivals in Minnesota, and it's always Labor Day weekend. So there you have it. You know when to go there. And the Farmers' Day celebration was originally put together to honor and thank the local farmers around the area, apparently. And I don't know what it entails, and I'm trying to find that. I probably should have prepared this before, but I assume it's just a typical small town festival where there is a parade and shops and stuff, and it does look like that. It includes a parade, a library book sale, a car show, basketball, food vendors, bingos, and more. And so,
Don't tell Mom about the library book sale.
yeah, yeah. Whenever we're out with her, she always likes to stop at little free libraries and places like that.
Exactly.
But yeah, so it just seems like a typical small town festival, but it is cool that it's one of the longest running festivals in Minnesota, too. So I really like Bovey. Bovey's a very interesting town.
Yeah, I liked Bovey. That was one of my favorite ones that we visited.
All right. So leaving Bovey, the next city was Taconite. Now I'm gonna be honest. We only saw the city hall there, but I have one interesting fact is that the Taconite City Hall was my 50th city hall if you include town halls. But basically my 50th city hall that I took a picture of. That's basically all I have to say about it. And also it doesn't look like there's actually much to the town either. Because it looks like there's a downtown with a few shops, but that's about it. But there doesn't have to be something to every town.
Yeah, Taconite wasn't one of the exciting ones on the trip.
Yeah, but of course we do have their small town festival, which is known as the Taconite Summer Bash. And
Summer Bash.
Yeah, and I find it funny because it's run by the Taconite Fire Department. So it just seems like another typical small town, I believe. That's a sketchy website. Okay. And it has a car show and a washer tournament. The image is so low quality that I cannot read about whatever the washer tournament is, but it has that, and I don't know when it is either, but hey, at least they have a small town festival, So that's about it for Taconite. Anything to add?
No.
No? Okay. So the next city we have up the road is Marble. And actually, before we go into Marble, I want to say that even though we're only speaking about the towns, the drive along there was also beautiful because you'd see these hills, these red hills because of the iron, and sometimes you would see these lakes as well, and it was pretty elevated too.
Right. Yeah, it was neat. It was neat to see the red hills and even trees growing through some of those red hills because the taconite is everywhere up there, and so that's what they're looking for is. And in some of them, the outcrops are right there that you can see. Yeah. So one of the things when we went into Marble, and this was another one of those where I mentioned about the surprises. One thing about Minnesota, and one thing that I would like to start to do is visit some of these towns that have baseball teams. So Marble actually has a town team, and they actually had a baseball on their sign and everything, and they have quite the baseball field. So Marble has a quite the town team for baseball. And what was their name again? It was the
That's
Marble.
what I'm trying to find.
It was the Marble. It started with an M.
Did it?
Wasn't it? I thought so.
Oh yeah, some of the Mallards.
Yeah, the Marble Mallards, and they're part of the Minnesota's huge into town ball, so they have these baseball teams that will play on the weekend, usually maybe a Saturday or a Sunday, and the whole town will gather and watch these baseball games. And they have this awesome field that is really nice looking. Right as you drive through, you'll see that, and that was another surprise because I really thought that was pretty cool that they had something like that.
Yeah. And so a few more things to mention about Marble is that the City Hall, of course. Now this City Hall was pretty lackluster compared to the other ones. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't like a historic brick building, and it doesn't have to be, I feel like a City Hall just has to work as a City Hall more of than be a beautiful building. And the one last thing to mention is, of course, the Small Town Festival. Now, we forgot to mention the Coleraine Small Town Festival, but it's the same as Marble basically, and they are both not really actually. They both don't really have a small town festival actually. They both basically just have a day where they will clean up the city or do other nice acts around the city. So Coleraine is called Cleanup Day. They clean up the city on that day, and Marble is called the Marble Day of Action. So they'll do good stuff on that day, and that's only for residents of the city as well. But
I'm sure if you want to go there and help clean up their town or city, they won't say no to you. But you're probably not gonna. There's probably not gonna be a ton of food trucks and vendors there and parades. But you can at least go and pick up garbage off the street and the parks or whatever.
Yeah. So the next city. So on these, it's interesting because looking at Google Maps, you'll find these names, but some of these names are just neighborhoods of the land. So my dad here just pointed out something right next to Marble named Silverwood, and it doesn't even have a description, but it's a neighborhood in Marble, I guess, along Silverwood Avenue. And you'll notice that is very common around the Hibbing area, but we can get to that later, I guess. But the next city up the line was Calumet. Now, this city I found to be, both my dad and I found to be it was honestly kind of sad.
Yeah, it was. It was almost like, it was a dead town. It was.
Yeah.
It was very well. First of all, one of the biggest problems is they had some road construction. So the main road going in, you had to kind of go around a couple blocks to get around to the main area. But it looked like it was desolate, and they were tearing up in construction, but nothing was open except the bar.
Yeah, there was like and the downtown consisted of a bar and a tattoo place. It was sad, and yeah, I feel like if the main street wasn't being torn up, we would have had a better opinion of it too. And of course, we visited the city hall there. I think it was a pretty good one. But also something to mention is that when you're going into the city, they have this water tower, right? Of course, they have a water tower. Basically, every city does. But on the side it says "Home of the Hill Annex Mine." Now that is used to be a state park up in the north of the city. Keyword though is used to be. The state park actually closed just a few months ago, I think, in order to get more mining in the area. And so apparently it was always meant to be a temporary state park, but it is kind of sad to see. And their water tower is technically still correct because they didn't say it was the home of the Hill Annex Mine State Park. They just said it was home of Hill Annex Mine, which is true. It's still the home of that.
And is that the one they were going to reopen? Is that why they were doing the construction, or is that in a different place that they were reopening?
No, they were. That one is just gone.
Oh, okay.
But the one more thing that we should mention is that through each of these cities is the Mesabi Trail. Now, the Mesabi Trail is a long, mostly biking path, but you could hike it too, I guess. And it's going through all of these cities, winding through.
Yeah, we got winding through all of them, and you could go up there and find a starting point. For example, you could go up there by that state park in Calumet, and there's a gate. It's like an arch, and it'll tell you this is the Mesabi Trail. You can get on right there and bike a certain distance to a different town. One other thing about Calumet, which I think made it seem more dreary and bad for us, was that day that we took this trip, the weather moves from the west to east, and there seemed to be this rain cloud that kept following us. And when we were in Calumet, we're walking up to the entrance of that state park, and it starts raining, and so it's gloomy and dreary and rainy, and the town is desolate, so it just felt like, boy, that you just didn't want to be there.
Yeah, it was almost like a movie, you know, where
Yeah.
you visit this and see this gated off state park, and then it starts raining. You know, the character like walks down the street with their head down.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, and so looking at this map of the Masabi Trail, it goes to all the way from Winton, which is up by Ely, and then it goes all the way down to near Grand Rapids. There's like a city right next to Grand Rapids named La Prairie, and it's not completely finished, I don't think. There's still some connections that need to be made, but once it gets finished, that'll be a pretty grand trail to try to. I mean, there will definitely be people who will try to bike the entire thing, and that would be a really cool sight because it's basically going in between two entire iron ranges.
Yeah, and it says it's 135 miles of paved
So
trail.
far.
So
I think,
far,
too.
it's going to be longer because there's parts that are not paved that they still have to somehow connect there. So that's going to be a long trail, but it'd be fun. You'd get to see a lot of the Iron Range, all of the Iron Range. Actually, two separate Iron Ranges.
Yeah. Yeah, most people don't actually know. I don't actually know if most people don't know this, but if you didn't know, Ely and Tower area, that is also an iron range called the Vermilion Range, and it's no longer active. All the mines, I believe, are filled with water, but it's interesting because Minnesota actually has like 3 different iron ranges, and the only one that's active is the Masabi Iron Range, which is the one we went up.
Right. Yeah, and south of the Masabi is the Vermilion. Is that the other one that's not? The other one that's not.
No, that's north of. That's
over?
the Vermilion. It's up by Ely. The other one that is inactive is the Cuyuna Range.
Oh, that's
which
right,
is
the Cuyuna.
which has Crosby near it too,
That's
and
right.
all of those.
So it's a
cities.
little farther south of where we were at.
Yeah, and I wasn't able to find a small town festival for Calumet either. So, it said they used to have like 2 different ones, but no longer do. I guess having a state park was enough, and well, now it's gone.
So maybe they'll resurrect their
Yeah.
city festival again.
Yeah, I bet if you were to go there next year, it would be a much better place. Just to us, it wasn't the greatest experience. So, yeah. The next city up the line was Nashwauk.
Nashwauk was actually a pretty neat town.
So of course I went to the city hall there, like always. I think that city hall was, I can't even remember. I think it was pretty good, actually. Yeah, I think it was a pretty good city hall. And another thing we did in there was there's this overlook named Hawkins Mine Overlook. And this overlooks, there's a lot of overlook in like one sentence. It overlooks the Hawkins mine, which has now been flooded. So there's actually this big lake there, and with these steep cliffs because in parts of it was, I assume, more hilly, but they couldn't flood up to that hill because other parts would get a lot more flooded.
Yeah, so and I thought that was pretty neat to be able to go to that overlook and view this lake, and it looked like it went on for a distance through other things. It's really a long skinny area, but there's nothing on that. So you're looking at this lake, and it's just like a secluded nature lake that's right in the start at this town, and so you get to see this. So the neat thing what they do now is to kind of, blend your working in the taconite to nature. They take these mines, and once they're done mining them, instead of just leaving it with ground up hole in the ground, they fill it with water, or let it naturally fill with water, and turn them into a man-made lake, which is kind of neat because it gives you that nature look that you can like.
Yeah. And something I found interesting about this lake is, of course, its shape is so weird because of how they mined it. And so as you are looking down the lake, there's this like one island that has a sharp cliff, so it just looks like a wedge kind of that's moving up, and it created like it just created an interesting view of the shape. And of course, one last thing is their small town festival. Nashwauk just has a 4th of July festival, which I mean is cool. But,
so you missed it.
Yep, you can't go there.
And we missed it too because we went earlier in the week. We weren't there for their 4th of July.
Yeah, we went on Tuesday, which was we didn't go on Saturday. We went on a Saturday, not Tuesday. Where did I get Tuesday? But but that was, what day was that? The 29th?
28, yeah, 29th.
Yeah, I think it was the 29th, probably.
Yes, it was the 29th.
Okay, and so they have a 4th of July festival, and yeah, you missed it, but you know, it's a typical 4th of July festival. Yeah.
One other thing I liked about Nashwauk that I thought was neat is after being in Calumet, which seemed like a desolate city, you went to Nashwauk, and that there were cars there were people there were people walking, you know, so it seemed like a bustling little city, and it was kind of neat because we just came from one in which seemed like there was nobody living there, and we went to this one, and it seemed like this was a pretty busy and active town, and I kind of like that. You like to see that in a town. You like to see some activity.
Yeah, and so the next city up our line is Keewatin. Keewatin. Yeah, Keewatin. Of course, as always, the city hall. I think that one was pretty good. I think that one was pretty good. And right across the street from the city hall, I think there was a veterans park, which you were mentioning earlier, that a lot of these cities have a veterans park dedicated to people who served from their city. And in this veterans park also was this old train, this Masabi Range, I forgot what it was called exactly, but it was this train. I can't find it, but it was this train from there, and I remember this, and I can't.
City Hall.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Okay, hold on. But yeah, so there was this train, and that made us wonder. Oh, there it is. Okay,
there it is.
And that just made us think about like the journey that this iron or taconite takes.
Yeah, because when we saw that, we talked about that. We said, so they're digging up this taconite here, putting them on train beds, and going on rail all the way over to Lake Superior, you know, whether it's Two Harbors or Duluth, somewhere along there, maybe even farther up Silver Bay or any of those, and then they get loaded onto ships there and get shipped down through the Great Lakes, through St. Lawrence Seaway, and probably over into the steel communities of Pennsylvania to then be used in steel.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty amazing to think about that, and I'm sure that's why that train is there, to kind of give you that history and that feel for, hey, it wasn't just, we weren't just digging up this stuff and leaving it here. It was being used for things, and taconite is used for a lot of different steel, and it's in a lot of construction items.
Yeah, and if you're ever driving up the North Shore, you see these giant mounds of gray like sand basically, and that is the iron being processed. And it's interesting because taconite on the Iron Range starts as red, and then it turns into like steel and iron, steel, which is the gray.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because you're thinking, well, shouldn't it be red? But it's not.
Yeah, and so also in Keewatin, there was this very interesting thing. So we saw this sign, and it said overlook, and it was an overlook that was pointing down this road. Now we go down this road, and there's also construction going on that road, And so we have to, like, of course, go around the construction. But the overlook didn't exist.
Right.
We go down the road, and there's a private, like, I forgot exactly what company it was, but it was just a taconite mining company. And so there was no overlook of the mine. There probably used to be, but it's probably been mined out now or bought by the mining company. And the last thing, of course, is their small town festival. They also have a 4th of July festival. They're like probably competing with their neighbor, Nashwauk.
Yeah, they're seeing who can blow off the most fireworks, maybe.
Yeah, it's like a war basically every time. And so we have made it to Hibbing. So Hibbing was our second to last, well, our second to last destination before we went back. And Hibbing was this, of course, is this large city, and when you're going in it, it just feels so lively, and it feels like a great city because they have a way larger downtown. It's almost like they have a few main streets here. Is something I noticed. So they have this street named First Avenue, which going down it you'd see all these shops, and then you turn on this street named Howard Street, and they also had a lot of shops there.
Yeah, and we went to the city hall, of course, there, and that was one of my favorite city halls.
Yeah.
It had a big spire, and it was really, you could tell it was an older building, but it was kept up very, very nice, and it had some neat little things out on the grass area, some little sitting areas, almost like a little park there as well with it. So that was a really neat city hall.
That's my favorite city hall. Actually, I think second favorite. Minneapolis City Hall is also really cool, but it was a really cool city hall. Now, after we visited the city hall, it was like a 1-minute drive. Not even. We just like went down the road and parked on the side, and then we visited where we ate lunch for the day, and it was known as the Sportsman's Restaurant. And this restaurant, it was like a typical downtown shop front, basically. And in it, I ordered just a bacon cheeseburger. I order like a bacon cheeseburger at every place I go. What'd you order?
I did. I think I had the patty melt.
Yes, you did. And the food was great there. We both agree that their fries were amazing.
Yes, their fries were really, really good.
So, if you're ever in Hibbing, we recommend that place. And also shout out to them. And I'm actually looking here. It looks like they are a historic place too, which I didn't know about before. But there's this old picture. At least it doesn't look too old, but it's definitely older, of the Sportsman Cafe there. And so yeah, we recommend that place if you're ever in Hibbing, but you can decide for yourself too. And so our next destination was the Mine Overlook.
Yeah, and this was another one of those that was, we said, okay, it's a mine overlook. How interesting can it be? You're just gonna be looking at a mine, but it was one of those it was one of those surprises. We knew we were going up there, but we didn't know what we were in for when we went up there, and it was cool. This is the place that they call the Grand Canyon of the Midwest.
Yeah, there was a sign up there that said, often called the Grand Canyon of the Midwest. So this giant open pit mine known as the Hull Rust Mahoning open pit mine, because it was 3 mines that merged together, and it's actually still active too. It's still being mined. And so while you're standing on this at the top of this big hill, you look out and you see all of these like, how do you describe them? They like hold all the taconite.
Yeah, the trucks or
They're just the trucks, but
then the shovel part,
yeah,
whatever.
Yeah, so there were these huge trucks. They were huge, if you were on top, like they show you, they have like an exhibit for these huge trucks. But when you're standing on there, they look tiny. It just looks like they're toy cars, basically.
Yeah, little Matchbox, little Hot Wheel cars way down there. Even smaller than that. They almost the mine is so vast that they looked like almost little ants. And these were mammoth cars. These were mammoth trucks. In fact, on the exhibit, we took pictures of each of us standing by one of the tires of one of the trucks, and those tires were taller than me. And though they're mammoth.
They were like two
tires.
times the size of you,
right.
Almost.
They're huge, and so it was an amazing overlook to be able to see this, and you could overlook that part, but on the backside of it, you could overlook the town of Hibbing. And
yeah.
So you could see from there. You could not only just see the open pit, but you could also then see the whole town of Hibbing.
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to mention is it kind of it like hindered our experience a bit, is that while we were up there, it was so windy.
Yeah.
Like, we went onto this part that was the tallest part of this hill, which was like an overlook where you could go like 360 overlook all around you, right? And our hats almost got blown off while we were up there. We didn't stay up there for too long, and it was super windy. And while we were at the overlooking the huge mine, we saw this looming rain cloud. The rain cloud that had been following us the entire time.
Right.
We just saw it approaching, and eventually it hit just this downpour on us. So we had to get in the car and sadly leave. We would have stayed up there longer if it hadn't been for the rain.
Right. I agree. We would have probably spent more time up on that overlook, taking more pictures, but that rain started coming in, and with the wind and the rain, it got a little crazy.
Yeah. And one last thing I want to mention about that overlook is that if you look, it was to the northeast. You look to the northeast and you see this water tower like miles in the distance. And so I take a picture of this water tower that looks super far away. It looks like it would take you hours to get there practically. And I zoom into it and it says Chisholm. And it's super interesting because it only took a 10-minute drive practically to get to Chisholm from Hibbing. And it looks so far away. It really puts into perspective how fast like cars are, and how great of distances you can travel in such a short amount of time.
So another thing about the drive up by that mine, when we left, we took down to another turn and we went over to this. It was almost like where Hibbing started, because they had the old street lights, and it was almost like the town. How would you say it? It was like the start of where Hibbing would have started.
Yeah.
And it was up in the mine area, and it still had the old street signs, street lights in there. And so I thought that was also very interesting, that you could kind of get a feel. And they had we didn't get out and read because it was raining at the time, but they had a sign there that had some pictures of what it looked like, but we didn't get out and read any of that because, like I said, it was raining. So. And
now that location is just really like a frisbee golf course and a dog park, it seems like. And I think that eventually that will even be gone, because there used to be an overlook there, but they mined it. They mined it out. And so I think that eventually even that will be gone, which will be a sad sight to see, but I'm glad we were able to go there in time.
Right, exactly.
And not one more thing. We have a few more things to mention about Hibbing, but the stuff we didn't do in Hibbing. Now, obviously, Hibbing is a pretty vast city, and there's a lot of stuff to do. But as we were driving to the mine overlook, we passed the Greyhound Bus Museum, which we weren't able to go to. And I mean, I don't think either of us would have been that interested in. It wouldn't have been our first destination, but it still is a destination that you can go to if you're interested in Greyhound buses or like history of transportation, I guess.
Right. Yeah. They probably talk about, the start of the Greyhound bus and how all of that started, but they probably get more and more detail about transportation in particular and things like that. So.
Yeah, and another thing is apparently there's Bob Dylan's childhood home. That's apparently a great landmark. It appears from super far away on the map, so that's something that you can visit there. And I mean,
when we were in Duluth, we did a adventure lab for a geocache, and it took us to 5 locations of Bob Dylan location when he was in Duluth, because this is his childhood home, but they ended up moving to Duluth. So there's a couple Bob Dylan connections in Minnesota, Hibbing and Duluth. So you could go to both of them and get your fill of Bob Dylan.
Yeah, and it looks like another thing. There's the Hibbing Raceway, and I think we actually saw a sign talking about some event that was going to happen at the Hibbing Raceway. And so it looks like that's something that you can go to there. It looks like a dirt raceway. So yeah, that looks fun. And of course, there's so many shops and restaurants and other places like that you could visit in Hibbing. But we're not going to mention them in specific, we're not going to specifically talk about them.
Yeah, and when we go here, we rarely go into stores. The Bovie was an exception, and that was great to be able to do that. But rarely do we go into shops, and we will occasionally do that if we see one that seems exciting. But we typically don't. But it's usually a restaurant, and then we're there more to see some of the sites and the historical type of things.
Yeah. And so earlier we mentioned that these names on Google Maps that were like neighborhoods inside Hibbing. Now, Hibbing is very interesting to me because it's actually a like physically massive city. Not the actual like city, like downtown portion of it, but like it takes up so much space. Now, a township is normally 6 miles by 6 miles, and it looks like they took 5 of them in an almost like staircase kind of shape, where it's like a box, but then they have one on top of the box. And so this leads them to be, I bet that these places used to be actual cities and not part of Hibbing. So we have this place named Kelly Lake, where it looks like there's a lot of people who live around there. There's this Kitsville. There's in the south, there's Riley and Little Swan and those places. And I bet those used to all be cities, but then they got taken over in the city limits of Hibbing, and now they have been vanquished to neighborhood status.
Yeah, and in fact, almost immediately after leaving Keewatin, you saw the sign that said Hibbing, that you were in the Hibbing city limits, but you never made it to the actual town of Hibbing for quite a number of miles, and so you could see that's what got that conversation going with. And Brady had already kind of did a little research on that and kind of knew kind of the history behind why it was so much bigger than what the actual town proper of Hibbing was.
Yeah, and also that kind of reminds me of something that we also talked about in there, is that we saw, as we were driving up to the overlook, we saw this very old buildings, and it said East Hibbing.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I assume that there was like an East and West Hibbing that eventually both consolidated into the full city of Hibbing too.
Right.
I would like to talk about Hibbing more, but that's all we did there, and we are also... Oh, wait, never mind. We have one more thing to talk about. Their small town festival, which is the Hibbing Jubilee. Have you heard of this?
I have not.
You haven't heard of this? Because, I haven't either. I was hoping you would. But the Hibbing Jubilee, it seems like there's like a parade and stuff there, and of course they have a lot of sponsors. and it looks just like your typical small town festival, but bigger, because this is we don't think that this is a small town. We think it's a bigger town, because it looks like they have this big parade. They definitely have a car show. I feel like every place has a car show, and I cannot see the schedule. Oh yeah, so it seems like there's a festival, kids carnival, parade, and street dance, and fireworks, sidewalk sales, and then there's also, it looks like a raffle and appetizers at Herbert's and Gerbert's.
So see, they even have fast food restaurants up there.
Yeah, and sadly, you guys missed this. Technically, if you're watching today, you can go to the street dance if you're up there.
Right, yep.
Because this will probably be posted around the time. The street dance is from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m., so you guys can just make it. But it's been going on since the 11th, so 2 days ago.
One other thing I wanted to mention about Hibbing and what I talked about was, some of you may know this, some of you might not know this, but there's a famous, besides Bob Dylan, there's another famous person that's from Hibbing, and it was Kevin McHale. He played basketball for the Minnesota Gophers, and then played for many years for the Celtics, won an NBA championship with the Celtics, played with the great Larry Bird, and so he was born and raised in Hibbing, played his high school basketball in Hibbing, went to the University of Minnesota, and then went to the NBA. So you kind of, Hibbing has some celebrity status in Minnesota with both Bob Dylan and Kevin McHale.
Yeah, and I mean, you would also hear, if you live in Minnesota, you hear about Hibbing pretty often. I mean, it's a place that gets talked about a lot, and I can see why now. It's a very cool city. But now we're on to our, well, technically not final stop, but our final destination on the trip, which is Chisholm. Now in Chisholm, we did an adventure lab. And this adventure lab first brought us to the Minnesota Discovery Center. Now, we didn't really do much in the Minnesota Discovery Center. We mainly just saw it and looked at it.
Right.
We were seeing if we could go in, but we decided not to. We decided to go into the mining museum instead. And there was also a Veterans Memorial there.
Now, the neat thing about one thing with the Minnesota Discovery Center, outside of there used to be a mine there, and I think they have an overlook that you can see, but that mine has since been shut down. But what they've turned it into is a bike park, so a mountain bike park, so you can, and they have different trails of different difficulty on those bike trails. So it's neat that they're not just leaving these mines as open holes. They're doing stuff with them. Whether they're filling them in with water, or in this case, they're turning it into a mountain bike park, and people can go and spend the day mountain biking around all these trails and stuff. And that's neat that they're able to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so immediately leaving the Minnesota Discovery Center, you see, and even before we entered the Minnesota Discovery Center, as you're driving along 169, you see this massive statue. And the name of the statue is Iron Man, not the superhero. It's just a man who represents all of the sacrifices and history and future of the iron mining in the area. And it was interesting because I think it said it was the third largest freestanding statue in the U.S.
Yeah, it was gigantic, and I can't believe somebody actually created that thing, because it was mammoth.
Yeah, and it was just super cool to see that. Of course, there was an Adventure Lab location there, and a geocache that we didn't check. We didn't think to check geocaching at that time.
Yes.
So we did miss it, sadly.
So now we have to go back there.
Yeah, oh, so what a shame. No.
But there are a number of things in Chisholm that we like. It would be nice to go into the Minnesota Discovery Center and spend some time there. it did cost money, and we chose to spend our money on the other end of it that we'll get to in a little bit. But there's a number of other things, so it is probably worth another trip at some point to Chisholm and see some other things.
Yeah. So the next destination it brought us to was the Minnesota Museum of Mining. So as you're walking in, there's this like gate too, and you pass right by the Chisholm water tower, and so I thought that was pretty neat.
And that was the water tower that we saw from Hibbing across the Grand Canyon of the Midwest.
Yeah. So as you're driving down, then you turn into the Minnesota Museum of Mining, and it's funny because there's a sign that says, "For tickets, pay at the castle," and that's it's accurate because you go in, and there is this castle that you have to pay in, and I just find it funny that there's just a castle there.
Right.
So we were there to mainly see one specific thing.
Right.
And it's one of the funniest things. So we saw Paul Bunyan's marble.
Huge highlight.
Absolutely the best of the trip. No, but it's this like 4-ton granite marble. And that's it. And they claim that it's Paul Bunyan's marble.
Yes.
And it was dug up in the nearby mine. And it shows you how much Paul Bunyan is like a staple in Minnesota.
It is.
And how much us Midwesterners think big things are cool.
Yes, exactly. It was so funny to see that, and they actually had a sign that said, Paul Bunyan's marble right outside that castle. So I mean, we probably could have seen that without going into the castle and paying. But
Yeah.
then that allowed us to go and see some other things, go into a couple of the buildings and a couple of the things on the ground.
Yeah.
Once when we went into one of the buildings was something that gave huge another big surprise for me. I knew this in the back of my head, but it never really triggered for me until I saw this. But we're in there, and they have this whole huge display about this doctor who was in Chisholm called Moonlight Graham. And if you're familiar with who Moonlight Graham is, he was featured in Field of Dreams, and he actually had played professional baseball, wanted to play professional baseball, played in one game, actually played one inning, only got into the field, was on deck to bat when the third out was made, but never ever played again. So, and he played for the New York Giants, but then he went back home, started his doctor practice in Chisholm, and that's what really made him famous, was being a doctor and helping. And so they got this huge display of everything he did from a medical perspective. Yeah, they did have some highlights of the baseball, but he hardly played baseball.
Yeah.
But that's what everybody knows him from, was Field of Dreams. So that was a huge highlight for me, because I'm a huge baseball fan. And so anything having to do with baseball, I get pretty excited about.
Yeah. And so outside that building, and just like in the general outside of the mining museum, there are these vehicles and other displays. And one of them I found really interesting. So it's this steam shovel. And they said that it's the last remaining prototype of the steam shovels, and that kind of steam shovel was used to dig the Panama Canal. And so it's the last remaining prototype of those. And I found it interesting because it seemed like it was just attached to a train car. But of course, it probably was, because how else would they transport it,
Right.
And so I just found that interesting there.
Yeah, I thought that was neat. There's a couple other interesting things there. Of course, another train was there, which of course is an indication of how did they transport all of the taconite. And it was interesting because we're there, and we saw this little building, this little shack in the distance, and it said sauna. And so we went over there to see what that was, and sure enough, it was It was a sauna, and they designated it. It was for minors to use and things like that.
Yeah, they put it there because it said like there was a lot of Finnish immigrants into the area, I think, and that it said that sauna is frequently used in Finland. But it was so funny to just in the distance of the mining museum see a shack that says sauna.
Right. It seemed rather out of place, but I guess it fit in because it fit in with the Finnish community that was prevalent in that area.
Yeah, and so sadly we didn't spend too much time in the mining museum. That seems like a place that we definitely have to go back to because I feel like there were a few buildings we didn't even go into.
Right.
And even the building that with the Moonlight Graham exhibit, there was like an entire place in the back that we didn't go into either.
Right. We didn't see half the stuff there
because we were running out of time. So, but then we go to this next location. It's this bridge across the lake. It's not even really a bridge at this point. It's more of just a land bridge that cuts a lake in half. But it houses all of these flags, and I love flags. I love geography in general, so I thought it was cool. On one side was the flags of the U.S. states, and on the other side was flags of countries. So I thought that bridge was cool. And sadly, there was the last section of the Adventure Lab there that was unable to be completed because it's gone. Something there is gone. Like this shovel.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a big shovel there that you were supposed to get some information off of, but the shovel was gone, so we could not finish that Adventure Lab. So that was kind of sad. Now, one other thing they had right by there was on the side of this big building was a big picture of Moonlight Graham and said home of Moonlight Graham. So I had my picture taken and I'm pointing up to him and doing that. So and the interesting thing is the day we were there, the day that we were actually there, it was officially Moonlight Graham Day. Not in Chisholm, but worldwide or countrywide, supposedly that day was Moonlight Graham Day because that was supposedly the day that he played his only game of baseball. And so that's been designated as Moonlight Graham Day. And so I got home and somebody had posted something, hey, it's Happy Moonlight Graham Day. And I said, hey, look where I happen to be on the day of Moonlight Graham Day.
We didn't even know that. It was so cool it was so cool when you figured that out.
Right.
And speaking of that, let's look at Chisholm Small Town Festival, the Moonlight Graham Days. So Moonlight Graham Days, Chisholm. So Moonlight Graham Days, or Doc Moonlight Graham Days.
Yeah, because he was a doctor.
Yeah, and he was as you mentioned, most prevalently a doctor. So it looks like we missed it. It was July 5th. It seems like, or is that no? They're just posting bingo nights. Never mind.
Yeah, go on.
Is that it? That's not it. What? Oh, okay. It's held July 31st through August 4th. So we haven't actually missed it. So it's a long weekend of events that pay tribute to the town doctor who enjoyed a short stint in Major League Baseball. Unbeknownst to many, he served. This served as the inspiration for a character of the same name in the novel Shoeless Joe, which became the major motion picture Field of Dreams. Now okay, here. So it has a parade, a car show, a street dance. It has exhibits for Moonlight Graham, a baseball exhibition game, and more.
Oh, sounds like I'm gonna have to make a trip up there sometime.
That seems really fun,
Graham
actually.
Days. Yes.
So there you have it. That is Chisholm, and it doesn't. I mean, we've mentioned the things we'd want to see more of there, which is the Discovery Center, and we'd want to see the Museum of Mining there. So we're definitely not done with this area.
Right. Yeah.
And just a couple more things to mention. On our way home, we took a different route. I wanted to see at least a city in Aiken County, which I had not been to before. So we stopped at Hill City and got the city hall there. And I mean, Hill City, small city, on Hill Lake. Wasn't really any hills around though.
No, I didn't see any hills, but there must have been, and then they've destroyed them.
Yeah. So didn't really see much of the city. It looks like there's a park and campground there, public water access, and of course you gotta have a bar and grill and stuff like that.
Right.
But yeah, not much there. Seems like a cool tiny town. And then the last place we stopped in was I got the Emily City Hall. And we had stopped in Emily the year previously for gas, and then we saw this old motel named the Why Not Ranch, spelled Y, like the letter Y, and then a knot, like tying a knot.
Right, exactly.
And it's this old log building. And then we got the city hall there too. So
And I think I said this last week during our thing, but Emily is. It seems like all these roads that we keep going through seem to take us through Emily, and it's like that must be the nexus of the universe. At least
Yeah.
I keep saying that. It's really not, but it's fun to think about that because it seems like it's everywhere that we wanted to go, we had to keep going through Emily.
And I mean, that's how cities form, though. They form along significant roads or along significant railways, you know?
Exactly.
But that is going to be all for today. That's all the cities we have mentioned, or we went to. And so, where do you want to talk about next week? What trip?
Let's talk about our trip to International Falls.
Okay, so the year previous
Yes.
trip. All right, so we'll talk about that one next week, guys. But I hope you enjoyed listening, and we'll see you next week.
Like to hear some comments from all of you. Let us know. I think we've got on one of the podcast sites, you can actually leave us comments and let us know what you think. Love to hear your thoughts. Love to hear maybe ideas you have for places we could go. Thank you very much. We'll look forward to hearing you guys again next week.